I put my resignation letter on my manager's desk on a Tuesday morning, and by Friday I was gone. Not just from the job. From everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to the moment I found out. Because that's where this story actually starts. My best friend and I had known each other since we were 19. First year at University of Waterloo. We were the kind of clothes that people comment on. We'd been groomsmen at each other's weddings. He was the one who drove my wife to the hospital when our daughter was born. Because I was stuck on a highway in a snowstorm outside of Guelph. I trusted him the way you trust gravity, not because you think about it, but because it's just always there. My wife and I had been together for 7 years, married for 4. We lived in a semi-detached in Hamilton, not far from the escarpment. I worked in project management for a mid-size construction firm. She worked remotely, doing UX contract work for tech clients. On the outside, our life was ordinary in the way that most decent lives are. Not perfect, but ours. I came home early one afternoon in February. It was a Thursday. I remember because I'd left a site meeting early, which almost never happened, and I stopped at the No Frills on Barton to grab groceries. Because my wife had mentioned, we were out of everything. I had 2 bags in each hand when I walked through the front door. I heard her voice first, then his. I stood in the hallway for about 4 seconds. Maybe 5, the bags were still in my hands. I remember thinking, in this very flat, very calm way, that I should set them down before I did anything else, so I did. I set the bags down. Then I walked toward the sound. I'm not going to describe what I saw in detail. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I stood there, long enough for both of them to notice me. And then I turned around, picked up my grocery bags, walked to the kitchen, and started putting the food away. Neither of them said anything for a long time. I could hear her scrambling, the sounds of panic from the other room. He appeared in the kitchen doorway about 2 minutes later. He was fully dressed. His face was doing something complicated. He started with, "Man, listen," I said, "I think you should go." He said my name, twice. I kept my back to him and kept putting things in the refrigerator. He left. My wife came into the kitchen a few minutes after that. She was crying. She started talking, explanations, context, apologies, reasons. And I listened to all of it while I finished unpacking the groceries. I didn't interrupt. I didn't raise my voice. When she was done, I said, "I need you to go stay somewhere else tonight." She said, "Please. Can we talk about this?" I said, "I need you to go stay somewhere else tonight." She left within the hour. I sat at the kitchen table after that and stared at the wall for a while. Then I called a lawyer. I want to be clear about something, because people always ask. There was no dramatic confrontation. No screaming match, no throwing things. No phone calls at midnight where I yelled and she cried, and we said things we couldn't take back. That's not who I am. When something is broken beyond a certain point, I go quiet. I always have. The lawyer I called was someone my colleague had used for a separation 2 years earlier. He answered that same evening. I explained the situation in about 6 minutes. He told me what I needed to know. I thanked him and hung up. That night I started going through our joint account. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I'm not that kind of person. But I moved my half of the savings into an account she didn't have access to. And I called our bank to flag the account. In Canada, you can't just drain a joint account during a separation without consequences, and I wasn't interested in consequences. I just wanted what was mine, protected. By the following Monday, I had retained the lawyer properly. He filed the initial paperwork that week. My wife had been staying at her sister's place in Mississauga. She called me twice a day for the first week. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to every message. In the first few days, they were mostly apologies. By the end of the week, they were shifting. More questions, more frustration. Some confusion about why I wasn't responding. In one message she said, "You're not even giving me a chance to explain." I had already heard the explanation. My best friend texted me on the 3rd day. The text said, "I know you're not okay and I'm not going to pretend I have an excuse. I just need you to know that I'm sorry." I read it once. Then I blocked his number. What surprised me, and I say surprised, though maybe it shouldn't have, was my own social circle closing in. Mutual friends started texting. His girlfriend at the time sent me a message saying she was sorry and that she hoped. I knew this didn't define him as a person. A couple I'd known for years, people I'd had over for dinner a dozen times, reached out to say they were thinking about me and hoped we could all find a way through this together. Together, I blocked them all. Not out of anger. Just because I understood, clearly and without resentment, that these were his people more than they were mine. That's how it works, usually. You don't realize whose side people are actually on until there's a side to be on. The separation process in Ontario is not fast and it is not simple. The house was the main issue. We'd bought it jointly 5 years earlier, and even though I'd put in a larger down payment from my savings before the marriage, the law doesn't always reflect that cleanly. My lawyer and I worked through it carefully. My wife's lawyer pushed back on a few things. There were 3 months of back and forth before we reached an agreement I could accept. I kept going to work through all of it. I showed up every day, managed my projects, had normal conversations with my colleagues. Only 2 people at the office knew what was happening. And that was by accident, not design. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want anyone checking in on me with soft voices and careful eyes. My best friend reached out one more time, through email, about a month in. I don't know where he got the new address, probably figured it out, same way you do. The email was long. He talked about shame, about what it meant to him to lose my friendship, about all the years we'd had. He said he would spend the rest of his life trying to make it right if I'd let him. I read it. I archived it without responding. Then I changed my email address. I want to talk about the moment I decided to do more than just separate. It was a Sunday in April. I was at my apartment. I'd moved into a 1-bedroom rental in Dundas while the house sale worked itself out, and I was eating cereal at my kitchen counter, and I realized I hadn't spoken to anyone I knew before February in over 6 weeks. Not my wife, not my best friend, not our mutual friends, not even my colleagues beyond what was strictly necessary, and I felt fine, not numb, not suppressing something. Actually fine, quieter than I'd ever felt. Like static I'd been hearing for years had suddenly just turned off. That Sunday morning I made a list. Not on paper. In my head. I listed everything that connected me to the life I'd been living. The job, the city, the social media accounts, the phone number I'd had since university. The annual camping trip with people who had chosen to stay neutral. The group chat that I'd muted but not left. Then I started working through the list. I gave notice at my job the following Tuesday. I had a clean employment record, a decent professional reputation in my field, and enough saved that I could take time before I needed to land somewhere new. I asked my manager to keep it quiet until my last day, and she respected that. I deleted my Instagram that week. I'd had it for 11 years. I deleted my Facebook the day after. LinkedIn I kept for now because I needed it for the job search, but I scrubbed it down to the minimum. No photo, no connections that linked back to my old life, just credentials and contact information. I changed my phone number. I booked a storage unit for the furniture and belongings I didn't want to take with me immediately, and I contacted a moving company for the rest. I told exactly 2 people what I was doing. My lawyer and 1 colleague from my office, a woman who'd been kind to me, without making a production of it, who'd simply slid a coffee onto my desk one morning, without saying anything, and who I trusted with my forwarding address, because the legal paperwork needed somewhere to go. Everyone else found out I was gone when I was already gone. I moved to Victoria in May. I'd been to Victoria once before, for a conference, and I remembered liking the pace of it. Smaller than Hamilton, quieter, different feel entirely. I didn't know anyone there, that was the point. I found a furnished apartment in James Bay, 2 blocks from the water. I spent the first month barely leaving it. Not because I was depressed. I want to be clear about that. But because I was deliberately doing nothing for the first time in years, and I needed to see what that felt like. It felt like exhaling. I found a therapist in Victoria about 6 weeks in. Not because I was struggling, but because I'm not an idiot. And I knew that what had happened to me was the kind of thing that works on you underneath whether you're paying attention or not. She was straightforward and push. We met every 2 weeks. She helped me understand some things about my own patterns, the way I'd been carrying certain relationships like obligations rather than choices. The job search started in earnest in July. I'd been doing light consulting work remotely, enough to cover my expenses. But I wanted something more structured. In Victoria, the construction and project management market is smaller than Southern Ontario. But it exists. I landed a role at a regional infrastructure firm in September. Smaller company, better culture. The commute was a 15-minute bike ride. Made new friends slowly. Deliberately. A guy from the office who was into trail running. A woman from my building who had a dog and a dry sense of humor. A small group of people I met through a community volunteer thing on Saturday mornings that I'd joined mostly to have somewhere to be on weekends. None of them knew my history unless I chose to share it, and mostly I didn't. The first attempt to reach me came in June. My wife had apparently been trying various routes. Old email, old phone, and had eventually gone through my colleague back in Hamilton. My colleague texted me a heads up before forwarding anything. She said, "She's asked me to pass along that she wants to talk. She says it's important. Do you want me to send you her message?" I replied, "Thank you for the heads up. Please tell her that all communication should go through my lawyer." My colleague did exactly that. The second attempt came in August, through a different channel. A letter, sent to my parents' address in Brantford. Because apparently that was the only physical address anyone could still connect to my name. My parents, to their credit, called me before doing anything with it. My dad said, "There's a letter here for you. Do you want us to open it?" I said, "Is it from her?" He said the return address is her sister's place in Mississauga. I said, "You can forward it to my lawyer's office." My dad was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Oh, okay." He didn't push. Neither did my mother. They had known something was wrong since February, and when I'd explained it to them, quietly, in a single phone call, without drama, they had been exactly what I needed them to be. Sad, but on my side, and willing to follow my lead. That's the thing nobody tells you about doing something like this. The people who are actually safe will take their cue from you. They won't interrogate. They won't advocate for the other party. They'll just wait, and be there, and let you decide the shape of things. The third attempt was the one that surprised me. In October, about 8 months after everything, I received a message through LinkedIn. The stripped-down version I'd kept active. From a name I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. But something about the phrasing was odd. Too personal for a professional connection, so I read it. It was from a friend of a friend, someone adjacent to my old circle who I'd met maybe 3 times. The message said something like, "I know this is a strange way to reach out. I'm not doing this on anyone's behalf. I just wanted to say that what happened to you wasn't okay. And that some of us said so at the time. I hope you're doing well, wherever you are." I sat with that message for 2 days before I responded. When I did, it was brief. I thanked him and said I was doing well. I didn't invite more conversation, but I kept the connection. Because sometimes you need one small piece of evidence that the world you left behind wasn't entirely rotten. I closed the LinkedIn account 3 weeks later anyway. My best friend. I keep calling him that, and I'm aware of the irony, but it's just the accurate descriptor for what he was. Apparently told people, in the months after everything fell apart, that I had shut down, and that he was worried about me. That he wasn't dealing with it in a healthy way. I heard this secondhand, through my colleague, who heard it from someone in the mutual orbit. Shutting down. That's what it looked like from the outside. I thought about that for a while. What I had actually done was assessed a situation with clarity, made decisions, executed them, and moved somewhere better. I was sleeping well. I was exercising. I had a job I liked, and a city I'd chosen deliberately, and a small number of genuine friendships that I was building at my own pace. I was seeing a therapist. If that's shutting down, I'll take it. The other thing I heard, again secondhand, much later, was that my wife had told people I had abandoned her during a difficult time in our marriage. I want to be very precise about this. I discovered my wife and my best friend together in my own home on a Thursday afternoon in February. I gave her 2 hours to collect her things and leave. I retained legal counsel within 24 hours. I cooperated fully with the separation process. I responded to every legal communication through proper channels. I agreed to a fair division of shared assets. That's not abandonment. That's consequences. There's a difference. People who do what she and he did often need to blur that line. Because the alternative is sitting with what they actually did. I understand it. I don't hold it against them. But I'm not going to pretend the line isn't there. The divorce was finalized in March of the following year, 13 months from start to finish, which my lawyer said was reasonably efficient for Ontario. I was living in Victoria, working my job, running the trails on weekends with my colleague from the office. I didn't celebrate the finalization. I noted it. I made myself a decent dinner, and opened a bottle of wine I'd been keeping for something, I wasn't sure what, and I ate at my kitchen table, looking out at the harbor lights, and I felt, mostly, just quiet. The house in Hamilton sold 4 months after we'd listed it. My share came through to my account on a Wednesday morning. I looked at the deposit notification, moved the money into a TFSA, and went to work. I've thought a lot about what people want from a story like this. They want to know whether I'm angry. Whether I miss him. Whether there's some part of me that wishes things had gone differently. Anger? No. Not anymore. There was something adjacent to it in the first few weeks. But it was more like the feeling you get when you realize a bridge you've been standing on has rotted through. Not rage. Just the cold understanding that you could have fallen. And that you need to find your footing somewhere else. Miss him. This is the harder one. I missed who I thought he was for a long time. The version of him I'd built over 18 years, the guy who drove through a blizzard to help me move. Who sat beside me in the waiting room when my dad had his hip surgery. Who knew every complicated thing about my life, and seemed to carry it with the same care I carried his. That person. I missed that person. But that person and the one who was in my living room that Thursday afternoon aren't the same. When you find that out, you grieve the first one. And then you let go. Wishes things had gone differently. No. And this is the one people find hardest to believe, I think. But here's the truth of it. If this hadn't happened, I would still be in Hamilton, in that semi-detached, carrying relationships that were slowly making me smaller. In a city that had never felt like mine. In a life I'd built more out of momentum than choice. What happened to me was a betrayal. It was also in the end an exit. I'm 34 now. I live in a 1-bedroom in James Bay with a second-hand couch I like a lot and a bike I ride most days and a view of the water if I lean out the window at the right angle. I have a job that engages me and a therapist I see once a month now. Just for maintenance. My parents visited last spring. And we walked along the oceanfront. And ate fish and chips. And my mother cried a little, so she'd deny it. My colleague from Hamilton came out in the summer with her husband. We hiked part of the Juan de Fuca Trail. And I cooked dinner one night. And it was one of the better evenings I've had in recent memory. Nobody from my old life has contact information for me now. The email is new. The phone number is new. Social media is gone. If someone from before needed to reach me urgently, they would need to go through my parents or my lawyer. And I've made my peace with that being the shape of things. Occasionally I wonder what their lives look like now. My wife's. My best friends. I don't know and I'm not looking. It's not indifference exactly. It's just that those lives are on the other side of a door I chose to close. And I've got no reason to open it. Some choices you make because you have to. Some choices you make because the thing you're walking toward is better than the thing you're leaving behind. This was both.